Hello Year 10s and welcome to Horizons. You've already had a bit of an introduction to get you thinking about some of the big ideas that we're going to be looking at in Horizons, including how we need to broaden our perspective, broaden our horizons, hence the name, to be able to see things from different points of view and to gain a deeper insight into the way the world works and different beliefs around the world as well, related to some really important issues. To help with that, I want to, for our English component of Horizons, introduce you to a few really big ideas, some really important terms, some important language that you'll need to be familiar with, that hopefully will actually not just become part of your vocabulary, but become part of the way you think about the world. So that's the purpose of this lesson. So there are three terms I'm going to start by introducing. The first one is value. A value, we talk about things having value, right? Like the value of my car is $1,000. The value of my computer is $2,000, whatever. We often think about value in terms of monetary value, or something, you might say something you value is something that's really important to you. You know, this gift that my mother gave me has great sentimental value to me. It doesn't necessarily have financial value, but monetary value, but it's important to me. So we have a sense of that idea of something being valuable is something that's important. When we're talking about it here, we're talking about it a little bit more broadly, but it's the same idea. The values we're talking about here are, as it says on the screen, a belief about what is right or wrong, what is good or bad. In other words, what's important, what's worthwhile, and what's not. So values, we can express some examples of those. We have values related to all kinds of things. I have a belief that all people are created equal, right? That is a belief about what's right and wrong. It's right to treat people equally. It's wrong to treat people unfairly. So that is a value. On a different topic, you might have values like it is a common value that people in our society hold that women should have the right to control what happens to their bodies. On the other hand, and often this comes into conflict, there's a value that abortion is murder, and therefore that value some people feel conflicts with the previous value I stated. So any belief about what's right or wrong, how the world works, is considered a value. And values can sort of get grouped together into these two bigger ideas related to worldview and ideology. And I'm going to unpack each of these just a little bit now. So ideology and worldview are quite similar concepts. I think they both relate to how we view the world. They both are sort of fundamental systems of belief that we hold that shape everything we do in our lives, how we spend our money, how we spend our time, everything we say or do is driven out of the worldview and ideology that we hold. You can see there the definition of worldview. It's the overall perspective, the overall sort of point of view from which you see and interpret the world. So your worldview is like a lens that shapes how you read things, what you notice, what you ignore, what you place value on, and the opinions you form out of that all stem out of your worldview. Similarly, an ideology, and I think one of the key differences is that it's a system of beliefs. It's like worldview, but a little bit more systematic. It's been defined and organized. So an ideology is a system of beliefs and values that are used to explain or make sense of society. So let me just unpack that a little bit. I'm just checking my notes quickly. So often ideology is used to describe political or economic worldviews. And you might have learned about some of these. Perhaps in history, you might have learned about things like Marxism. My handwriting's a bit messy on this screen. Marxism, or that is very much an economic and political ideology that stems from a particular worldview, a belief about how the world should be and what the problems in the world are and what the solutions to those problems are. You may have also learned about things such as pacifism. You may have learned about ideologies and worldviews such as feminism. I'm going to talk about these a little bit more on the next slide, I've just realized, so I might have to rewrite them. One thing I wanted to point out was notice that each of these, and it's not always true, but each of these end with ism. Often when we talk about isms, we're talking about an ideology, a system of beliefs, a system of beliefs and values. Now, obviously, worldview and ideology, as I said, these drive everything we do, how we interpret the world and how we respond to the world. And all of us have a worldview. All of us hold internal ideologies, but we don't always even realize that, which is pretty bad, right? If this shapes who you are and everything you do, then it's actually really important that you consider it and sort of interrogate it and understand exactly what it is that you believe. Which brings me to my next question. What is your worldview? It can be difficult to figure that out, and sometimes it can be difficult to define. Some of them have neat names like Marxism, but sometimes a worldview is a bit more fluid or has fuzzy edges and can't necessarily just be defined with one word. But there's 3 questions here that can help you think about your response to that question. What is your worldview? What is good in the world? What is wrong in the world? And what's the solution? How do we fix the world or make it a better place? And if you can answer those questions, not just in the sort of surface level, like, oh, what's good? Well, I like nice food. I like video games. If you can go as deep as possible and try to get to the absolute heart of each of those questions, you may just reveal your worldview. We talked about some of them previously, some common ideologies that you may have learned about previously. I'm going to write them out again in my very messy handwriting. These are some you might have learned about already. Marxism, pacifism, feminism. Another common one is humanism. I want you to start by choosing one of these 4 or another one that you're familiar with and try to answer these questions for that worldview, for that formulated ideology. I want you to try to answer these 3 questions. And then I'm going to get you to try to answer it for yourself. What is your answer to these questions? I'll start by demonstrating with another ideology / religion, because most religions really are presenting some form of ideology. And I'm going to try to answer these questions for Christianity. Now, you might not entirely agree with the exact way I do this. I'm doing this for illustrative purposes, and you might say I'm being a bit, I'm simplifying a little bit. That's okay. But just to demonstrate, let me answer these 3 questions for Christianity. Then you're going to have a go at answering it for one of these 4, and then you're going to have a go answering it for yourself and see what that reveals about your beliefs about the world. So, according to Christianity, what is good in the world? Well, there is no one good but God alone. So that is a fundamental aspect of Christianity, is that we say the source of all goodness comes from God. And God is defined as love. In John, I believe it is, it says God is love. So I think it's fair to extend it to say God alone is good, and love, true, righteous love, is also good in the world according to Christianity. There's more perhaps we could say there, but this gives us a good illustration. Now, according to Christianity, what is wrong with the world? Well, fundamentally, and again, there's lots of problems in our world, but fundamentally, Christianity would say that what's wrong with the world is that humans have rebelled against God. Oh, that's bad handwriting. Lucky I'm saying it aloud too. Rebelled against God. We call this sin. And the result of sin is death and judgment. Is there an E there? I think so. So according to Christianity, the fundamental problem with the world isn't murder, it isn't theft, whatever, there's lots of problems. Fundamentally, Christianity would say the problem is that we have rebelled against God. We've tried to make ourselves king in place of God, and therefore we ignore his word, and we call this sin. And the consequences of sin are death and judgment. That's what's wrong with the world. What's the solution according to Christianity? Well, according to Christianity, it is salvation through grace, through faith in, I'll draw a cross, salvation through Christ. That is the solution to this problem. And that when we have that salvation through Christ, that leads to eternal life. And it should also change the way we live our lives by obeying, obeying scripture, obeying the Bible. Okay, so once again, you might not entirely agree with what I've said there. You might think it's a bit simplistic, or maybe I've got things you don't agree with. But hopefully that illustrates the point that that's how you could define Christianity. What's good, what's wrong, what's the solution? So in a moment, I'll get you to pause the video and think about for yourself, for one of these or another ideology that you're familiar with, what is good, what's wrong, what's the solution? And then have a go at answering those 3 questions for yourself. And then you might want to actually write a little reflection. What does that reveal? What do you learn about your belief system through answering these 3 questions? Okay, pause the video and then write your answers, and then come back and we'll finish off this lesson. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully you've got your answers, and I look forward to going through them with you in a future lesson when we can discuss them face to face and seeing what you've learned about ideology and worldview through that activity. Now, the next thing to ask is, how does this all relate to English? I'm doing this in the English component of Horizons. Why? Well, there's a few reasons. We'll talk about voice in a future video. But just for now, I want to talk about the fact that values, ideology, worldview, they are all embedded in every text. Every advertisement, every film we watch, every book we read, even every newspaper article which supposedly is reporting objective fact, they all express an inherent worldview. There's an expression, there's no such thing as a valuesless text. If I go back to the previous slide there, right? There's no such thing as a text that does not have inherent beliefs about what is right and wrong. Sometimes this is really overt. Sometimes it's explicit, which means it's made completely, it's deliberate. But sometimes it happens unconsciously. Let's have a look at some examples. You've been learning about Nazism and World War II. Let's have a look at some Nazi propaganda where there was an explicit ideology being expressed. So to help you unpack this, up here I believe this says the Jew. I'm not sure what the text down here is. This man is meant to be a Jew. And then presumably down here we have German, as in white German, hands raised in fists. Have a look at this image. Just look at it for a moment. What do you see in the image? What are the different parts of it? Do some text analysis. I pointed out 2 things. I see the face of a Jewish man. I see the hands of some Aryan Germans. What else do you see? I notice the lighting over here. I notice the use of fire, which is presumably casting the light. I notice the curtain. And I also notice that the Aryan German hands are raised in fists. All of this deliberately, because this is propaganda, this is a deliberate expression of an ideology, all of this is deliberately designed to express beliefs about that Nazi Germany held against Jews. You can see the Jewish man has a very ugly expression on his face. His features are exaggerated to make him look nasty and cruel. The lighting, lit from below, emphasizes that. That's a horror film convention, to light from below, because it makes people look monstrous. Fire gives this sense of destruction. We're pulling back the curtain to reveal the evil truth about Jews. Again, that's not my opinion. And the fists raised in protest, combined with pulling back the curtain to say we are going to stand up against this. This was deliberately designed to position the audience to embrace the ideology that was held in Nazi Germany, that Jews were the biggest problem in society and that the solution was to eradicate them. Let's look at another example. This is another example where the ideology is explicit. This is another example of propaganda. In this case, not for Nazi Germany, but for something that more of us can probably get on board with, women's right to vote. Women's suffrage refers to women's right to vote. So here is an example of propaganda designed to share that worldview, that women are equal to men and should be treated equally in the political sphere. So again, what do you see in the image? What symbols, what codes, conventions, what techniques have been used to try to persuade you to agree with that ideology? Give you a minute to look at it. Some of the things that stand out to me, and perhaps stand out to you as well, I notice the sun, the dawning of a new day. I notice in the same way, or similar way, we've got the trumpet, which is heralding in a new era. Both of these things suggest to me that we're looking to the future. There's more elements in it, but the video is getting long, so let's keep going. You can see that there is an explicit ideology that is deliberately being conveyed to the audience in an attempt to make you agree. However, sometimes ideologies are not explicit. Sometimes it's our own subconscious, deeply held beliefs that influence the way we create texts, and therefore what values are inherent in those texts. Let's have a look at an example of a text with an implicit ideology. This was the cover, this was the real cover for the board game Battleship, which I imagine many of you are familiar with, back around the 1960s. I forget exactly what year this one was released, but this was the actual cover back in the 1960s. What do you notice in this image? Hopefully, well, I imagine what they wanted you to see first of all was the happy smiling faces of the father and son as they play Battleship. I think the designers wanted that. But for some reason, they've included back here the mother and daughter cleaning the dishes, doing the washing up. It creates this picture of their family life, right? They've just finished a meal and now the father and son are playing this game, big happy faces, really fun. The mother and daughter, meanwhile, are cleaning up to allow that fun to happen. And you can see it's a bit of a blurry picture, but their faces are also smiling as they look at the males in the family, pleased that they're enjoying their time together. This reflected an ideology, a belief system about gender roles back in the time it was produced around the 1960s. It says how men and boys should spend their time, how women and girls should spend their time, and it demonstrates that they're all on board with it. They're all happy about it. So whether that was deliberately, this isn't propaganda, but it does reflect a worldview, and that worldview comes through in a really noticeable way in this example. Here's a more modern, example from the hit TV show Modern Family. Compared to the previous depiction of a family, this reflects more contemporary beliefs about what a family looks like. We've got the nuclear family here. That's a husband, a wife, 3 children. Then we have a blended interracial family, because if you know the show, she's I've forgotten, I think Colombian, and this guy's divorced and they're remarried, and this is the stepson, right? So it's a blended family. Oh, and I think the little dude down here is the new child. It's been a while since I've watched the show. Okay, a blended family. Not every family stays together. People divorce, people get remarried. Over here we have a gay couple with an adopted child, again from another race. So this reflects a belief system about what a family looks like, and the title is no mistake, right? A modern family. What does a modern family look like? Well, the ideology being expressed here, or the belief that's being expressed here, is that families are diverse, and that there's a whole lot of ways you can define and make a family. Again, possibly deliberate, possibly it was just reflecting the inherent beliefs of the people making the show. I'm going to show one more example because I think this one's really fun and really interesting. Here we have 2 covers from Superman comics. The first one was from 1944. The second one is from 1945, so it's just 1 year apart. But those of you who know your history knows that something very significant happened in 1944-45, and that was the end of World War II. In the first Superman comic, not the very first, but in the first example I'm showing here, in 1944, look at how the 2 characters, Lois Lane and Superman, are being depicted. Lois Lane is standing over Superman. She seems to be acting like as an editor as he tries to write up his news story. Those of you who know the story, Superman's secret identity is he's a news reporter. She's standing up. She seems confident. She seems to be looking down on him or assessing the quality of his work, and he seems to be struggling a little bit. They're both professionals, and she seems to have some level of authority over him in that profession. In 1945, very different depiction. Instead of a business suit with, I don't know what they're called, like not shoulder pads, but instead of that business suit, now she's wearing an apron. She's no longer in the workplace. They're in the kitchen. Superman here seems to be very confident and maybe telling her off, and she's challenging or questioning it. It's not clear, but there seems to be some kind of domestic dispute. And given that she's wearing the apron, it seems to suggest it's around something, some domestic failure on her part. Very different depictions of the same characters, each one reflecting values and beliefs about the world. In 1944, during World War II, there was a big push to get women into the workforce. After World War II finished, there was a big push to get women out of the workforce so that men could resume the jobs that they'd had before the war. I won't go into a whole lot of detail about the reasons for that, but what we're seeing is that as the needs or the perceived needs, as what those in power wanted changed, the common ideologies changed. And we see that in this stark example of 2 different depictions in a comic book. We see those changing belief systems. Okay, so lots of big ideas there. Values, ideologies, worldviews. What is your worldview? How will that shape the way you express your ideas? We'll look at that a lot more in some upcoming lessons.